Okay, so now what we need to try to do is get some of this styled. This being the nav that is nav global inside of the uh, banner area. And if we were to go back just real quickly to look at the source code, let's find where that is. You see here we've got the section banner, all right, and then inside of that we have a header, and then we also have this nav tag that has a nav, or excuse me, a global nav ID assigned to it. I think I said nav global before, but I meant to say global nav. So, and inside of the nav tag, we have an unordered list that actually has all the links on there. So what I need to do is I want to create a rule that is specific to this nav tag whose ID is nav, global nav. So if I go over here to styles, what I can do is I can just take this ancestor, let's copy that from the CSS, and we'll come down here, paste it, and then the descendant would be separated with a space, and then we'll say nav, and then we want the global nav that is assigned to that nav. Okay, so now what we've got is a new empty rule, and here we can start to do like background color and so forth. And for the sake of time, I'm just going to paste some stuff right there. So we've got a background color that's sort of this dark charcoal, and then a border top that's very similar but a little bit lighter. So we can save that really quickly, and let's go jump over to Chrome and do a refresh on the page. And you can see now that this background section is a different color. All right, I'm going to close this and then go ahead and minimize this. And then what I can also do is just pull this over so that we can see these side by side. Instead of jumping constantly back and forth, we can just do it a little bit more effectively. All right, so now that I've got this background color, what I need to start to look at is like the list items. Okay, so let's take this ancestor, let's copy that so we can use it down here for the list item, which would be inside of the UL, so then we could have our LI, right? So if we wanted to be really explicit in our descendant tree, this is what we could do. And then if I come down here, I might want to go ahead and just tell it to have a height, right? So let's do maybe 2.25 M, something like that, 2.25 M. Let's do a save on that. We'll go over here, do a little refresh. Okay, and then I think I might like that spacing a little bit better. Also, I think it's going to translate better whenever later we do a media query. I think it might be better in a horizontal row. Okay, and so now what we need to do is we need to adjust what happens to these things on hover, because you'll notice right now we've got, you know, the color of the type changing, but I want this whole section, whenever I roll out here, I want the whole section to roll over. And the reason that's not happening is because we need the anchor link itself to hover. And right now this is just hovering over the list item, right where my cursor is right now, but then if I put it here, that's over the actual anchor link. And the reason for that is because anchor links are actually inline elements, and they only take up as much room as they need to take up. They won't take up the full block like a list item will, like an LI tag. So we need to change the display type for that anchor. So let's go copy this, all right? And then I'm going to come down here and hit paste, and then I'm going to add A at the end so that we can make it the A is the descendant of all of that. And I'm going to first change the display type to block. All right, and then automatically what we should be able to see, actually let me save this, make sure it's saved, come over here, refresh, and then you see now whenever I roll over here, it's actually changing the color of the type because I'm actually hitting the A even though the color of the background's not changing. So what we could do then is maybe, you know, tell it to have a background hover color that changes, but there's some other things that we can do too before moving on to the hover state, and that is that I would like to actually come down here. I'm just going to paste some stuff for the sake of time, right? And I'm going to make it so that there's 0 padding on top and bottom, but I want maybe about 7% on left and right. Let's just try that, see 5-7%, something like that. So it bumps over, because right now it's very much out of line here, and it's sitting right up on the edge of the viewport, and I don't like that. And the other thing is I want to give these a visual separation with a really subtle bottom border. Okay, so let's save this real quick and just do a really quick refresh. And then you can see that now it starts to line up a little bit better, and we have a little bit more of a visual separation, even though it is very subtle. The other thing I can do too is go ahead and take this, copy it, and I'm going to take advantage of that and just add the hover state at the end so that I can actually give it a background color and have some other stuff change. Okay, and so let's go ahead and just paste that in so you can see. Now I'm going to change the background so that it's a brighter color. That means that I need to adjust the actual text color so that there's not too much of a conflict. We can make sure that there's good contrast. And the bottom border color is also going to change. All right, so it's going to hit that blue color that's normally this type, and you'll see that we sort of have like a little bit of a almost reversal, right? So we keep the color here the same with the text, that's fine, but then it's going to go to a white background. So let's just let's save what we've got, come over here, do a refresh, see if we're okay with that, and you can see that it really pops out a lot, so which is kind of useful, I think. One thing that you also might notice, or you might have noticed, is when you hover, you get down here, you see this black line underneath. And if you were to try to inspect it to see, you know, kind of like where that's coming from, it might help you have a better understanding. So like, for instance, if I were to hover over the entire nav, right, you see that all of it's blue all the way down. Okay, so the entire nav is taken up that way. And then if you look at the UL, it's the same thing. And if you look at the individual list items, you get to that last list item right here. All right, and you click on that and you come down into this A tag. What you'll notice if you pay attention is that that's where you start to see the black. It's not, you know, down here, it's not showing up when you hover over the A. So if you look at that list item right there, there's some discrepancy somewhere in between the list item and the A. And if you wanted to get rid of that, if it was bothering you, what I would recommend that you do is look at the differences. So first of all, what we have is this list item right here, and we have a height right here. And the concern that I would have by setting the height, there are two concerns, and I didn't mention this before, but if you set the height of something, first of all, it's going to restrict the height. So like, for instance, if you ended up having something that was going to page, or it was going to do a word wrap, then you would end up having a problem where the second line would get cut off. The other problem is that, but that's not necessarily a problem for us if we know that we're going to keep our navigational words short. But one of the other things that does happen whenever you set a height of something that's going to have text in it is that sometimes if the line height doesn't match the height, then you might have this problem where you have mismatched spacing. So there's some different ways that you could deal with this. And one of the simple ways would be to just go ahead and add line height here. So let's do line height. And we can say that we want to match the line height so that it's 2.25 m, so that it matches the actual height of the list item. So if I save that and come back over here and do a refresh, now you see that that black line on the bottom is gone. You may like having that there, you may not. It just depends on what you think is the right thing. So let's go ahead and look at making this work so that whenever we go to a larger screen, that these links will actually start to float side by side next to each other. To do that, what we need is a media query. And what we're going to do over here in our nav section, right? So this is section banner, right? So what we'll do down here is we can come down and let's just make a media query below everything. So it'll be the @ symbol. So @media screen and then we'll do open and close parentheses with a set of curly braces, and then I can go back up inside my parentheses and I can add the condition that is going to trip this breakpoint. And basically the condition that we're looking for is anything that is a minimum width, so I type min-width, and a colon, and we're going to say that our breakpoint is 600 pixels. Okay, oops, 600 pixels. There's no semicolon right there. So what this means, okay, is that now I can put rules inside of this media query, and by having it at the end of all of my other nav and global nav sections, is that it's going to kick in once it hits a 600 pixel dimension. That means that, as I said before, we're doing this as a mobile first site. So the idea is that we're going to design it so that it originally is going to load really quickly, and it's going to load properly on a smaller device or a smaller screen dimension, or even viewport dimension, I should say, before it'll start to load all the stuff for a larger screen. And the advantage of that as a reiteration is that for smaller screens, especially if I use like background images or anything like that, it's going to load those smaller background images a lot faster. The other thing too is that it allows us to progressively work up instead of having to go backwards, in which case I think that sometimes it's more convoluted and complicated to go from a larger screen to a smaller screen in terms of writing your media queries and stuff. So what I'm going to do is I need to, basically make these list items floating. I don't need to change the anchor just yet. Like, that's not the part that I need to change. That's not what needs to float, because the anchors are inside of list items. It's the list items themselves that are taking up the full block, as a parent inside of one larger unordered list. So what I can do is come up here, and I'm going to copy the selector for section banner nav global nav ULLI. I want to copy that. And down here inside my media query, I'm going to paste it, and I'm going to go ahead and do my curly braces. And you might be wondering, okay, like, why 600? What's so special about 600? Does that mean something? Well, basically what it means is that it's the place at which I think it's probably going to break. And these are literally referred to as breakpoints. And some people will say, oh, you need a breakpoint at this size and at this size and at this size because these are standard phone sizes or tablets or whatever. And those are just sort of guidelines as to where you should maybe consider starting and stopping different types of layouts. But they are, they're not by any means definite hard and fast rules, because really you need to change it where things break. So the way, again, as a reminder, just to test that, is if you were to inspect something, let's just say inspect, and you get that inspector open, if you look up in this top right corner of the display view, you'll notice that I start getting these numeric values of how big this is. So I can open it up, and you can start to see the width changing dynamically as I open the viewport, and that's when you can start to see whether things break or start to look bad and so on. So that's what I'm referring to whenever I talk about breakpoints. So what I need to do is I need to make those list items float. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to just say float left. All right, and if you wanted to just see what that does, let's save it. Let's go over here, hit refresh. Of course, this isn't larger than 600, so I need to open it up. And right at about 600, it pops open. All right, let's do an inspector so that we can actually inspect the width value as we open the thing. Okay, so let's do this. And you can see that it's at 556, 580, right, and then right at 600 is boom, right when it pops open. Now you'll see that there's some problems with it right off the bat, and I can tell you right now, if we were to just look in the inspector, let's take a look in the inspector for a second. One of the problems I can tell you that we're having immediately is, we're not getting our background color. It's white back here. Remember, our background color is supposed to be like this dark color. Well, if you remember, you could go up, like, first of all, you could look in the A, you don't see any actual background property. You could look in the list item if you didn't remember. I don't see it there. UL, there's nothing there, right? Okay, so maybe it's this. Yes, in fact, it is. And this is the background color. If you turn that on and off, that's actually the background color. You're not seeing it here. Let me show you something though. If I go here and I turn it on and off, you can see that the background color is changing. So that is the background color that is not showing up in this view. And I can tell you exactly why. And the reason is because this unordered list has items in it that are being floated, and I haven't told it what to do about the overflow property. All right, so this is just a general rule that is always going to be true. right? So if you have items that are floating inside of a parent element, the parent element has to have a property called overflow set to the value of hidden. And then see, now it shows up properly if I go ahead and commit to that. And you can see it live. You can see it happening live. And so that's the first issue, is that I had to do overflow hidden. And then also the other thing that you noticed is whenever I put that on there, this H1 and the beginning of the next section was cinching right up here next to this, because it was like allowing the next pieces of block to come up into that area and occupy whatever space was available still. By doing overflow hidden, that actually helped. And just to sort of reiterate why that is useful, whenever you have something that is floating inside of another element, it sort of changes the way that the document flow is read, and the floated items, they're changing the way that they behave innately. They're block elements that are starting to act like elements that are in line. And so the browser gets a little bit confused about the amount of space that those children actually take up inside the parent element. And so it wants to just collapse the parent so that you don't see like the background content, stuff like that. Things will start to visually collapse on the page. So if you see something like that happening, just remember, like, hey, did I just add floats recently? And then go into the inspector and kind of mess around with it and go to the parent of the floated elements and try to add an overflow hidden. It works almost every time, unless there's some other thing that's also compounding the problem and going on. Okay, so let's go ahead just really quickly and make sure that that actually is going to work. Let's jump back to our code. I'm going to copy this descendant, and I'm going to add it down here inside my media query, because I'm only floating stuff inside of this media query, so I'm only going to set the overflow to hidden inside the media query. So let's do it like that. So overflow is hidden. And then the other thing too, and this is just my kind of preference, because the UL actually comes before the list item, I actually like to organize my code in such a way that it reflects that. So I'm going to actually go and paste it up here so that it's in the right order. I'm going to save that. Let's come back over here. Let's do an actual refresh on the page, and it is floating, but look, it's doing this other weird thing, like where it's trying to collapse it in such a way that you can't see the entire link. It's pretty odd though, because if I resize the page like this, it pops back and it looks okay. And what's kind of odd about that, and by the way, what was happening here, let's just refresh the page again, and it does it again. It's page 1, and 1 is coming down here, page 2 is down here. Remember before when I told you if you set the height, if you explicitly set the height, that's one of those weird things that will happen. It'll cut something off if it does a word wrap, but the reason it's doing a word wrap is just bizarre. One of the ways that I could alleviate this problem is that if I know what I want the width to be for these, a really simple way of dealing with it is that I can go over here to my list item and just see what happens if I set the width. In this case, I've got 4 links. I could say it's 25%, and that solves that problem pretty easily. And let's just check it and make sure, and it pops down with my media query, which is good. And I think I like that. And I can even do a text align, because I might want to have my text aligning in the center, and we'll say text align center. And now everything is evenly spaced, which is good. And then one of the things too that you might notice is that when you pop over here, you might prefer that the links are also centered here as well. And if that's what you want, you need to take that text alignment out of the media query and just put it further up in the page. Let's take a look at what I'm talking about. So first of all, I need the width only to be set at 25% whenever it is in the floated mode, which is in this media query. So let's go under the float for the list item, and let's set the width to 25%. Now, what I was saying before is if I want text align to happen both here inside of this media query, but also in the mobile view, then I really should just come up here in the mobile view for the list item and say up here somewhere around line 52, say text align, and then center, and see if I like it like that, because this will apply it to both the mobile view that gets loaded first, and then because I'm not overriding it, it will also cascade up into the larger view as well. So let's go ahead and do a refresh. Oops, I think I might not have saved this. Yeah, I need to save it. Let's go do a refresh. Okay, and then if I cascade down, you see that my links are centered. And it's really kind of up to you what you want to do here. It doesn't really matter. It's just dependent on what you think looks best. Okay, so you know, this is how this is set. And if right here you see that the line that's underneath here is very, very thin, you could also choose, like if you wanted for the unordered list, if you wanted to come over here, you know, you could choose to set it to a taller height. Right now, so far, we had been setting things to like a 2.25 m. So let's see what happens if we were to set this to a height of 2.5 m. Let's make it a little bit thicker maybe of a line on the larger views. Maybe 2.5 is a little tall. I don't know. Let's see though. And then what we could do, let's just save that really quick and let's refresh over here. And you see that it expands this. So now there's a line down below. It's kind of up to you if you want to expand that also on this screen for the anchor tag and the hovers. You could also, you know, copy this. Let's copy this selector from up here. And we're going to make a new one down inside the media query for this anchor tag that has a border on the bottom. So let's choose that. And let's just say for right now that it's going to be black and it's going to be solid. All right. And let's see, 0.25 m. And the reason I'm choosing 0.25 m is because remember before the height of A was already 2.25 m. All right. And then what we did was we made this taller, right, where it's 2.5 m, so that leaves an extra quarter m left over. So if I add this border, right, we can do that, and then I can make the, you might not even like this, so you don't have to do it on yours if you don't want to, but anyway, so I can go and I can make the hover state. Let's edit this and let's see if we can pick a different color. Maybe this blue color for the rollover. Let's try that. Do a save. Let's go over here, refresh, and then you see it pops up like that. And you know, maybe this black line is too subtle for you. Like, you know, you could mess around with it however you want. All right, but that's a good way to maybe get started with the navigation, and we can move on from there.